Hey there, guys. Today I'm discussing what the difference between card draw and card advantage is. Okay, so today I'm discussing what the difference between card draw and card advantage is. Now, this is very somewhat subjective to a degree because card advantage does mean that you've got card advantage over your opponents to a degree in a sense. So, i.e., you have more cards than what your opponents have. But that's not really the main thing about card advantage in a sense, in the difference between what it is to card draw, which is more so what I'm talking about with what card advantage is versus card draw. Because of course, if I have 7 cards in hand, or Steve, my opponent, has 7 cards in hand, and I have 3 cards in hand, or if I have the 7 cards and he has 3 cards, whatever, whichever way it is, whatever is going on, he has the card advantage over me, or I have the card advantage over him, whichever of us has the more cards. And in a 1v1 game, that sort of card advantage is much more important. Yes, sure, it is still important in EDH where you might say, well, Steve over there has 7 cards and I only have 3 cards or whatever. So he has card advantage over me. So that might not be good for me, but in this case, it's not that important to a degree because I've got 2 other opponents as well. So if I can get that politics game going, well, between me, Alan, and Vanessa or whatever, we can take down Steve, and whatnot. So that card advantage might not mean anything because he doesn't have card advantage over 3 players, and if he does, then he's got a lot of card advantage. But anyway, what the difference between card advantage and card draw is. Now, the best way for me to sort of explain this is a bit with mostly cards for the most part, or effects that allow you to do different things with different zones. Now, card advantage can be a little bit hard to explain and sometimes whatnot from card draw and whatnot because, a lot of card draw is sort of card advantage because you're getting that card draw advantage essentially or whatnot. And a lot of card advantage turns into card draw because if you've got that advantage, the ability to get to more cards and whatnot, therefore you will draw more cards and whatnot. So they sort of do intertwine quite a lot. But the main thing is that card advantage, for the most part, gives you access to more cards than are what in your hand, either by allowing you to play cards from your graveyard, play cards from the top of your deck and whatnot, or play cards from other zones. Like if you have red, for example, you can exile cards and cast them from that temporary zone and whatnot, and things like that. So another one is like Bolas' Citadel. You can play cards by playing life and whatnot. Augur of Autumn, another great one that comes up. Rada, Heart of Kelt, another great one. You can play lands with both of them off the top. That is a form of card advantage. Being able to play those cards from the top of your deck. Augur of Autumn's even better because, again, you can cast creatures from the top of your deck if you've got the Coven going, which is usually pretty easy to get going. So that's another form of extra card advantage. Ramunap Excavator, even though it's just lands that you're able to play with that, being able to have access to the lands that are in your graveyard is really good. Meren and Muldrotha, really good, because again, you're able to cast creatures with Meren or play creatures at the end of turn with Meren, and with Muldrotha you're able to cast creatures from your graveyard, able to cast enchantments, able to cast artifacts, able to cast planeswalkers, 1 permanent of each type, essentially, each turn from your graveyard to the battlefield, and that's a really good level of card advantage. But there are other forms of sort of card advantage, especially if you are playing those graveyard decks and whatnot, and decks that put things into different zones like red does by exiling things. So like red's impulse-based card advantage is a card advantage. You know, like I can play these cards, maybe not this turn, but I can play them next turn or whatnot. So that is card advantage because I've gotten access to more cards than what are in my hand. I haven't drawn those cards to my hand. I can still play those cards. Yes, maybe I can still only play them for a limited time or whatnot, but I can still play them. So that's another, form of card advantage that isn't card draw specifically. There are also cards that are kind of card draw, but they don't say draw a card, like these cantrip sort of style of effects. There are a few in green as well as blue for the most part, that basically they say look at the top, 4 or 5 whatever cards of your deck, put one of them into your hand. It doesn't say draw a card, it says put it into your hand, but you essentially are drawing a card. You're scrying whatever 4 or 5 and drawing one of those cards and then putting the rest to the bottom, essentially. So those are also sort of card advantage cards, although I find that these cantrip sort of style of cards, in a sense, are much less effective for the most part than cards that net you more cards. If it nets you more than one card, then it really is card advantage because, a cantrip is completely different, even if it's not drawing cards, and it is, in a sense, card advantage because, again, the difference is that the cards will go to your hand in card draw, and if it's card advantage, basically they're going to another zone or whatnot. So, again, if you're doing that whole thing, then the difference is, like cantripping card advantage, I guess, or whatever, isn't as good as getting more cards. Again, if you get one card for one, then it's not a real advantage. It's only a cantrip at that point. But it is still access to more of your deck, or gives you access to see more of your deck, especially the ones that like brainstorm and whatnot. That is a card advantage card. It is not a card draw card unless you have other effects. Now, yes, it says draw cards, but it also says put 2 cards back on the top of your deck. So, you really only drew 1 card and you just rearranged 2 of the cards with the top of your deck. Now, it can really be good with shuffling effects and whatnot, things like that or whatever. But again, you don't really worry too much about that for the most part. You just worry about whether you can do other things and whatnot and get that real card draw going, or that real card advantage going, not just cantripping. But cantripping, in a sense, is also card advantage. Anything that lets you know what sort of cards are coming in your game plan, like Search for Azcanta, or things that let you scry in the beginning of the upkeep or whatnot. Sylvan Library is a card advantage style card because it lets you see the next couple of cards and whatnot. It even lets you rearrange them if you would like, or even lets you draw them to your hand. So it is kind of both, and that's where sort of the crossover can be. It is card advantage at its first point, and then at its second point it can be card draw if you decide to play life to draw extra cards. So again, there is a lot of crossover between these two to a degree, but I wanted to try to explain it in its most simple way. Again, think of it like this. Card draw is simply cards going to your hand, for the most part. If it says draw 2 cards, that's card draw. If it says you can look at the top card of your library, you may cast, instant sorceries, or you may cast creatures or whatever. Or you can pay life to cast cards and whatnot. Then that's card advantage. If it says you may play cards from your graveyard, you may play lands from your graveyard, you may cast creatures from your graveyard, whatever. You may flashback a spell from your graveyard, things like that, or you may flashback spells from your graveyard, things like this. Then that's a form of card advantage. Again, Red's exile-based card advantage is that. It's sort of in the name to a degree, but that's what it is. It's really that. It's not card draw, because again, you're not getting them to your hand, you're getting them to the exile zone. So again, anything that puts it in a separate zone or whatnot, or lets you cast things from a separate zone, is card advantage more so than card draw. But not to say that those sorts of advantages are any less meaningful or impactful. Some of them can be more impactful sometimes, because, especially Bolas of Citadel and cards like that, those are insane levels of card advantage that you can get and whatnot. So those can be really good in your deck, given the right deck and whatnot. Not like you needed a right deck for Bolas of Citadel, but some of the cards are only really good in the decks that you can play those effects together with each other, and they sort of synergize together, or you just don't really have many other options for the most part and whatnot. So there are some times where you will need to make sure that you are able to get the most value for your buck. But anyway, guys, I hope that is as clear as what I can make it, and you guys now have a firmer understanding of what the difference between card draw and card advantage is. I think this is more of an introductory guide, I guess, because a lot more established players probably would know what this sort of is, but it's sort of like one of those ethereal things sometimes, maybe, that some people go, well, I've never really thought about it, but what is the actual difference? Okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense to me or whatnot. Yes, if I'm not putting those cards to my hand, or I'm only drawing one card for one, then it's more of a sort of, card advantage. I'm only getting that replacement effect for the most part on this one card. I'm not getting ahead. And I really think when you get real card advantage again is when you can get more than one card as well. But anyway, you guys can let me know whether you found this helpful, whether you're new, old, whatever. You've been playing for a short time, a long time, whatever. You can even tell me that. Write your thoughts, all of them, down there in the comments below. I'll be sure to try to respond to those comments. I really do love interacting with you guys, talking about all these EDH geeky things that we love. So yeah, I'll see you down there in those comments, or I'll see you in the next one. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?